real estate agents, property managers across the country, tenants, landlords. The landscape has changed with leases. We're going to talk about it right now. Stay tuned. Ooh, maybe not.
I'm the ringleader, so listen up.
Cleo Whittier, expert property manager of how many years?
Too many.
Oh, Cleo, this has come up every year, and the crunch time is here for leases, fixed term leases. Airbnb started the trend. Don't worry about a bond. Don't worry about length of term. Just come on in and start paying. And now we're starting to see some trends across the real estate industry with fixed term leases. Talk to us.
Well, what brought this about is probably the new legislation that's come in, as well as obviously tenants and the shortage of property. So security for the tenant is very important. Whereas locking a tenant in for a fixed period is not as important to the landlord. If you have a tenant that vacates, you most likely, probably 80% of the time, will probably garnish a bit more rent if you put the property on the market now from what you would, continuing on with a long-term tenant. And tenants usually that ask for a fixed term are, families, people that are needing that contract for schooling, and also sometimes for insurances. So if you have contents insurance, the big companies do prefer that you have a locked in contract. Nowadays, the break lease clause for a tenant towards the end part of the lease, 75%, if that's actuated, they only have to pay a 1 week break lease fee to end the contract, leaving the owner, sometimes out of probably about 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks worth of rent. So it is a little contentious point for tenants and landlords on both sides. We have always had a bit of an ethos to leave a tenant month to month in our office, as in they're still protected by the original terms of the contract. Your rights are still the same, you just aren't fixed, locked for a term of 12 or 6 months.
And it seems that everything's going that way, in a way. But the days, I think of the old fashioned days, was you make the commitment, you're in. You're not getting out of it. You've made the commitment, and it's mutual. If I'm a landlord and I'm giving you a commitment for 12 months, so and you're a tenant, you make that commitment for 12 months. You've both made that commitment. But over the years, it's changed. It's like, sure, you've made the commitment, but you can, Mr. Landlord, you can't get out, but Mr. Tenant, you can if. So it seems like, the old fashioned sort of handshake and, we're both going to commit to 12 months out the window. So why are you going to
That's
do a
right.
lease?
Yeah, look, you can get divorced at any time. So
Yeah.
basically, yeah, the tenant can get out of the contract for a lot of different reasons. I had a landlord ask me a little while ago, well, how do I get out of the contract? And I go, well, very, very difficult. Like, you have to prove extreme financial hardship at NCAT to get a tenant. In fact, we have only, in the history of such a long time being property managers, had 1 or 2 cases where the owners were permitted for the tenants to be asked to move out early. And one of those reasons was because the owner was returning from Afghanistan, and it was a war happening at the time, and he came through as a refugee and he needed the property back. That was one of the only times I've heard of a tenant asked to, leave during a fixed term. So
Wow.
it can happen, but it's like a rainbow unicorn. It's very rare for an owner to be able to get possession back once a tenant's locked in for a period.
Okay. So I'm a landlord. You're a property manager. My tenant's lease was for 6 months, and and I ring you up and go, I want another 12-month lease. What do you say?
I say, sure, we can definitely sign the tenant up for another 12 months. It doesn't impact or affect rent increases. You can still only do one per year. So having your tenant locked in for a 12-month period at a certain fixed rent doesn't really factor in. But if circumstances change for you, Mr. Landlord, it's going to be very difficult, to make those changes. For example, if you were planning on selling or having a family member move in, having the flexibility of a month to month contract will allow you to make those changes, whereas a fixed term will not. You are locked in for that period with that tenant.
But Claire, I think that I think what people shouldn't forget is it's the whole emotion of I want my unit back or the tenant, I want to stay here. None of that's fundamentally changed. Yeah, sure, 12-month lease, 2-year lease, 6-month lease, whatever. But at the end of the day, the drivers haven't changed. So the tenure, the actual true tenure of the tenant in that property is similar. Do you know what I mean? So they're not staying longer or shorter because they're not because of these fixed terms. But certainly that old fashioned way where we used to say, no, 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 I don't want it not on a lease, they're gone because when that lease expires, all of the terms continue, just the fixed term doesn't continue, and people seem getting pretty comfy with that these days. Even with phone contracts, look at Telstra. When you used to always want to, have to be on a phone contract, and those days, like, no, no, no contract, that's fine.
Same with the gym, the gym memberships now, Fitness First used to lock you in for
Right.
24 months. That contract was ironclad. I never went. I went once or twice in the whole thing. And they still charge me like clockwork. Look, the main reasoning for a fixed term in the past was controlling the tenant's vacate or relet. And the fear was, I don't want my tenant moving out during winter. Winter's the worst time to relet my property. That's gone now. As you said, that's really not relevant in our climate, whether it's winter, Christmas, spring, autumn. The market's hot. If your
Yeah.
tenant moves out now in August, September, it doesn't really matter. We still will rent that property out quickly. Your vacancy rate's going to be low and you're going to get more rent anyway. So what's the reasoning for signing them up? So for the landlords become more secure and more relaxed in not needing that fixed term, I feel, and the tenants also have that trust now with the new legislation that they can't just be asked to move without a valid reason. So I think it's a win-win. It's less paperwork for us.
Yeah, well, that's right because you're not. It's not a product dollar productive. You're not charging a letting fee when that new lease gets put in place. Now, one thing our headings are leases are for losers. Let's clear this up. First of all, the initial lease, got to do it, got to get those terms right. It's the subsequent
Relet.
subsequent relets or redoing a lease with the same tenant that's not being done. And then there's the word, which I think leases for losers is probably more relevant with. We're not allowed to call them leases.
It's a contract or
So
agreement, lease agreement,
lease
residential
the
tenants.
residential tenancies agreement
Yes.
is the New South Wales term. Lease it is not. Although in commercial I believe it is, but residential it is not. So but how many people still don around the word lease in resi all the time?
And look, they've evolved over time. Remember, you could, if you're a private owner, you could go to the post office and they'd give you this pink lease agreement, and you'd see some of
About
those
that.
old handwritten lease
Yeah.
contracts, and you're like, What? There's no fixed term. What do you mean the rent's not put on here? Like, they've been very, very lax, and they have come a long way. Our lease contracts now are very, very detailed. You've got so many new clauses that weren't in the old leases or lease agreements. The pet clauses, for example, being able to receive digital notices, which is huge.
Yeah.
Things like that. You've got all the statutory requirements now, the landlord information statement, the tenant information statement, all these things that were never really included. So that first initial lease agreement is very important, that you as a tenant go through that thoroughly, and as an owner, if you have particular things that you want in there, that you advise your agent. And then those things will carry on and carry on and carry on year after year. It doesn't matter if it's signed or not signed after the 12-month or 6-month period. Those initial terms will still carry on.
Claire Whittier, thank you very much. I hope we help some tenants and landlords out there today.
You've gone urban today, Mark. Definitely a great landscape in the back. Very, very
Thank you.
chill.
Thank you. Yeah, I bought this cap and I didn't realize it said douche.
I never got that
I was like,
friend.
that's so cool. It's like, oh, it says I'm a douche.
It's deuce.
Douche ex machina. All right. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks, Legend. Cheers.